Okay, everybody, I want to go ahead and invite you to Defenders Live tonight. The reason I'm jumping in here instead of Laura, because we all want Laura here instead, is because she's having all sorts of connectivity issues with her system. So I'm jumping on here tonight. Just want to let you know we have a pretty good show tonight of somebody I've been looking forward to talking to for a long time. Laura has too, which is Gary Quesenberry. And I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, because if not, the man might shoot me over it. But anyways, let me tell you a little bit about Gary once we get started. But before we do, let me give you a quick tidbit. So recently in the last 2 years, my wife and I moved down to Arizona, and it's really hot here, right? It's like Hades hot. So I've been trying to acclimate by working out in the middle of the day every day. And today, I think it was 114 or 113 degrees when I was working out. What's so interesting is over time, the last 2 years, as I do this, I have been acclimating to where what's hot for most people here doesn't seem that bad for me. Here's the point to this. Here's the point, right? Sometimes we're uncomfortable in life. Sometimes, things are really, really hard. But if we pursue and keep doing that, oftentimes we're able to then meld into whatever it is. In my case, melding into being able to adapting to the heat. So whatever it is you're going through at this point in time, whatever you're doing, keep going. Keep going. Don't be afraid of the fire. Don't be afraid of the hard stuff. And I think that over time that does pay off. At least it is for me in this little tiny, I guess, capsule of that. Anyways, all right. Let me go ahead and tell you about Gary tonight. Gary is an author with books. He's a retired Federal Air Marshal. If you know those boys and girls, those people can shoot and they do some good stuff. He's also a former Top Shot competitor, and from what I understand, on 2 different seasons, which I'm a fan of the Top Shot stuff. So I'm looking forward to talking to him tonight. So that's pretty much it. Let me tell you a little bit more about him. Okay, so he's born in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, where his parents taught him the values of hard work, patriotism, and commitment to family. His passion for the outdoors and patriotic spirit led him to enlist in the U.S. Army. U.S. Army at the age of 17, where he served as an artilleryman in the first Desert Storm. After the events of 9/11, Gary went to work as a Federal Air Marshal, and from there he traveled the world. In his country service, devoted his time to studying in the fields of violence, predatory behavior. And if you know Federal Air Marshals, those boys and girls go everywhere, and they get some incredibly good training. In October 2020, Gary retired from federal law enforcement, and he's now the CEO of Q-Series LLC. It's his personal holster brand and the Quesenberry, hope he doesn't kill me, Quesenberry Personal Defense Training. There, he's developed numerous basic and advanced level training courses focused on mental toughness and defensive tactics. So boys and girls, if you know me here at Defenders, this guy goes right down the lane that I'm trying to go for. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I think we're going to pull a lot from him. As a competitive pistol shooter, Gary has been featured on History Channel's hit television show Top Shot, Season 3, and Top Shot All-Stars. Wow, we got an all-star here. And was featured as a situational awareness expert on the syndicated television show I Crime with Elizabeth Vargas. He has an extensive background in domestic and foreign counterterrorism training and has worked in both the private and corporate sectors to educate others on the importance of situational awareness and personal safety. Now, as you guys know, Laura's supposed to be here. She wrote this whole thing. So I'm writing it up because this is a last second thing where I got thrown into the fire here. So anyways, it looks like he has a couple kids. One's in the Army, one's in the Air Force, and one's in the Navy. So he spread them around pretty well. His philosophies on life and all we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and bring in man of the hour, Gary.
Hey, what's going on?
Howdy, how are you?
I'm pretty good. And you were really close on that last name.
Okay, how do you actually say it?
It's Quesenberry. A lot of people say Quesenberry, but it's quest, like question.
Why couldn't your parents have come up with a little easier name to say? Come on now.
Well, when I was learning how to spell, I thought exactly the same thing.
But of course. Like, it's a long one, too.
You working out in the heat. You get used to it.
Yeah, you do. You develop a tolerance for it. So in other things in life, you can develop a tolerance for even the stuff that kind of bugs you. All right. So I'm going to go down the list of questions Laura sent me here that she had kind of set out for you. So first one's on your philosophy of life. What would you say is your overall perspective on life as far as how one can approach it to be successful? And more importantly, how did you develop that?
Well, my philosophy on life, huh?
Yeah,
So you're starting off with a really deep one,
it's
but
long.
I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it really simple because that's the way I like to live my life. Is really simple. So let me see. Just treat other people the way you want to be treated, and don't be an asshole. That's pretty much my philosophy in life.
The golden rule.
All right. Yeah, I just added the don't be an asshole part because I get you in trouble.
Well, isn't that part of it, right?
Right.
Okay. So what do you think are your most important values in life, and where do you believe most of your values come from? I'm going to presume it came from your upbringing, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, part of it was my upbringing. Like most kids, you got rough spots. Parents divorce and things like that. But I always had a very strong family unit, and I try to keep that going in my life. Like you said earlier, I've got 3 children, and because of my job and the nature of my work, I've had to move them around, all over the country.
Yeah.
And they're resilient kids, and now each one of them's in the military. My youngest, actually, that was in the Navy, just got out not long ago. So,
Oh, good.
she's out doing great things because she was a linguist and everything. So she's very marketable when it comes to her skill set.
Wow.
But
A linguist is very marketable.
oh, absolutely. And that's the one thing that keeps me centered and focused on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. It's just family.
So any of your kids deployed right now?
Not right now. No, I've got a son who's in the 82nd. He's down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And, luckily my daughter, she's in the Air Force, but she's attached to Space Force actually. And she's in Colorado, and she gets to come home this weekend. So we're really excited about that.
Oh, I know right where she's at in Colorado then. All right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned divorce. After the divorce of your mom and dad, which is tough, right? Were you able to maintain a good relationship? Were they able to maintain a good relationship?
I think I was. They weren't necessarily able to maintain a good relationship, but at 10 years old, you don't really know that much what's going on. It was me and my little brother, and he's 4 years younger than I am, and we had each other. So and now that I've retired and moved back to Virginia, he lives right across the street from me, so we see each other every day. And it's but I'm still really, my mother's since passed away. But my father, he's still right down the road. My whole family lives within a 10-mile radius of each other. So I'm just really glad to be, over that career hurdle with the Federal Air Marshal Service and just, back here in the mountains with my family doing what I like.
Wow, that's great. That way you have a good family unit. All right. So can you give us a rough outline of your background in military, law enforcement, which I didn't realize, it says besides the Federal Air Marshal, as a business owner and as an author? How did that come about, and where did you start, and how did it grow into what it is today?
You know what? I think about that a lot, and I look back on some of the things that I've kind of stumbled into, really. And it's, I've really been blessed to have some of the opportunities that I've had in my life. So to start out, I was, once I graduated high school, I graduated at 17, and I was already back then in what was called the delayed entry program. So I knew I was going into the Army. And at the time, I didn't have anybody to talk to about the military. Nobody in my family had been in since the Civil War, actually. So everybody just kind of fell in those little gaps between conflicts. So nobody ever really, was drafted or joined or whatever. But anyway, I joined the Army. I had 2 options whenever I went in. I could be infantry or field artillery because I'm colorblind. And at the time, those were your options. Well, I was at the MEP station, and they were showing these really cool VHS videos about what you're going to be doing in whichever job you choose. And I got to watch both of those videos, infantry and field artillery. And they both look like really cool jobs. At the end of the day, I asked where I would be stationed if I went into the infantry, and they're like, "Oh, you'll end up in North Carolina." And in my 17-year-old mind, I was like, "Well, that's right down the road. I'm trying to get out of here. I'm trying to leave. I want to get away from here." And they're like, "Well, if you join field artillery, you'll end up in Fort Ord, California." And I just went straight Jed Clampett at that point, palm trees, movie stars, the whole 9 yards. So I was stationed at Fort Ord, California for 3 years. And, then Desert Storm kicked off, Desert Shield. And at the time, there were no, because I was on a big 198 towed howitzer, and the Marine Corps is the ones that had the towed howitzers over there, so they didn't need us. But there was a training accident. They lost some artillery guys, and they needed some people to backfill positions in a replacement detachment that would eventually end up getting attached to a 102 Deuce unit. And I volunteered, me and 175 other guys, and they took 7 of us. So I was fortunate, I feel like, to go over there and actually be able to serve and put the training that I'd received to use. And then after that, I decided I was, done, wanted to do something else. So I got out of the Army, and I just kind of putzed around here in Virginia for a little while. Like most guys, when they get out of the military, they're, just trying to blow off a little bit of steam, maybe drinking a little bit too much. And a good friend of mine who, his father was telling me, there's a federal job coming open in Beckley, West Virginia with the Bureau of Prisons. They're building a new prison up there. And I didn't know anything about it, what kind of work it was or whatever. But, everybody told me, they're like, that's a good job because you get a federal retirement and all this stuff. I'm 4 years old, not thinking about that kind of thing. And I ended up putting in my application. I got that job, worked in the Bureau of Prisons for a few years. 9/11 happens, and I immediately put in my application to go to the Federal Air Marshal Service. So, September 11th, I had my application in by October. And at the time, it was just paper applications. So you had to, physically write out a paper application and mail it in and hope that it got to the right person. Luckily, mine did. Again, with the color blindness, it shut me down at first, but I got past that hurdle and worked for the Federal Air Marshal Service until I retired in 2020. And then, in the meantime, while I was in the Federal Air Marshal Service, that's when a couple other opportunities started knocking on my door. One of them being the Top Shot, and then the holster business. So,
okay, I want to break into this a little bit, right? Yep. So I come from a law enforcement background, but municipal police officer, SWAT guy type thing. And I've always told people, especially for those watching our audience, if you really want to see what goes on in America, because it's not reported on the vast majority of the time, is go do a ride along with a cop, with a deputy, with somebody like that. Go spend some time with somebody like that and learn from them. So I want to go back to your prison days, right? Because I think working in a prison, federal or not, unless it's like some fancy little federal prison where really you're just a slap on the wrist, Martha Stewart type stuff, right? But if you're going to a real prison, I think that's one of the best training grounds in the world for somebody to spend time there. Was there seminal things within there where you're like, man, that right there, those things right there really formed my mentality for the other stuff?
Absolutely, 100%. And I was very fortunate whenever I started work, in the prison. It was a medium to high security prison. So you've got some, pretty shady characters in there. And it's not like they're locked down 24 hours a day. They're out and about walking around you. But at the time, the prison was just being built. So it was brand new. When I showed up there for what they called institution familiarization, IF class, it goes on for a week, 2 weeks. I forget what it was. But there was no inmates there. So, there was a bunch of people came in from other prisons, some people from penitentiaries, some people from, different FCIs, federal correctional institutions and stuff across the country. And I was fortunate enough to latch on to some really good mentors. And once the inmates started rolling in, I received my training in but in FLETC down in Glencoe, Georgia.
Yeah.
And that was good. It was good training. It was only 3 weeks, but it does not prepare you for what you're going to face behind the fence. And, once the inmates started rolling in, I was able to kind of acclimate to those surroundings gradually, as opposed to just being fed to the lions on day one. And I think that helped a lot. But the one thing that I learned that I feel like is the most important skill that I picked up in any part of my career, in any part of my life, actually, is the ability to communicate. Because, when you're behind the fence, you're not armed. You're not, you're just there. And sometimes if you're working a housing unit on the evening watch at 6 p.m. or whenever the lights come on outside, everybody gets locked into the cells or into their units, and they're outside just walking. It's you and 129 inmates locked into a big pod. And then you don't lock them down until, like 9 o'clock at night before the count. And, a lot goes on in those housing units, and you've got to know how to communicate with those guys. And like I said, and again, that kind of helped me develop that life philosophy I was talking about earlier. Treat people the way you want to be treated. I'm not in there to punish you. You're in there as punishment. I'm there just to facilitate your safety and make sure that nobody's getting out of line. So I tried not to, ruffle anybody's feathers. I did my job, kept my head down, for the most part. But it was a good job. It was a big learning experience for me, and I think the skill sets that I picked up there transferred very well to the Federal Air Marshal Service in terms of my ability to communicate. I was lucky enough to get selected to be on the SORT team, Special Operations Response Team, the hostage rescue unit.
In the prison.
In the prison, and that was some really good training, and I think that prepped me for what was to come with the more extensive training that we received in the Federal Air Marshal Service.
So for those of you listening, right, he mentioned the SORT team in the prison. Think of SWAT team. That's all it is. It's a SWAT team. It's just in the prison itself. They call them SORT. But SORT. They're phenomenal. I've trained a couple of different of those teams, and boy, they're fantastic people. So, and it just seems to me like that preparatory time in the prison probably set you up for success in Federal Air Marshal, right? I have a couple buddies who were cops with me, went on to become FBI agents, or they went into Federal Air Marshal, a couple of them. And it just seemed like that time as a cop, that time in the prison, those type of things, that just really builds it, because you learn the behaviors of bad people. You learn how they think because you're inundated by them day in, day out. You're with them all day long. You spend time talking to them and you get to know them. You brought up a really good point, right? About the biggest skill you learned was your mouth. Right. In my police world, my first 5 or 6 years, I was always in the fights, right? And I finally learned, once I learned to use my mouth well, I could talk myself out of most of the trouble I got myself into, which I think is an important skill for all of us, right? Defenders. If we're having to defend ourselves, oftentimes, if our situation awareness is good and our verbal skills are good and we can think well on our feet, we can usually, if we get caught in the problem, talk our way out of it instead of resorting to the gun in the first place. What do you think?
Absolutely. That ability to de-escalate is essential when it comes to self-defense. You talk about defenders and self-defense and stuff like that. And whenever you think about self-defense, or whenever you talk to someone about self-defense, the first thing that pops to mind is, well, what do you practice? Do you do jiu-jitsu? Are you doing Krav Maga? Do you box? Did you wrestle in high school? These type things. And to me, that's your last line of defense, the physical piece.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of other options, and I've written a whole series of books about it. But your situational awareness, that's something that was developed very keenly for me whenever I was working in the prison, because you really got to have eyes in the back of your head. You got to be able to learn and read human behavior to the point that you know what's going to happen before it starts, escalating and actually coming to fruition. So that situational awareness piece, I feel, is critical. And then past that, you've got de-escalation, which is your communication skills, and then you've got confrontation, which is where what most people consider to be self-defense. But to me, it's the entirety of those things that really make a person the absolute safest they can be, because you can walk around all day long. You can carry a gun, you can practice jujitsu, you can have a 3rd-degree black belt in whatever you want. If you're not paying attention and you can't see something coming or know how to talk your way out of a bad situation before it escalates, then you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah, spoken like a real defender here, right? Unfortunately, I think too many of us in the gun world focus just on the gun, where to me, the gun's just simply the ending of the sentence of the whole thing, right? And
that's where you put the period on everything, is that gun.
Yeah. If as a civilian, if you've pulled the gun, you've let other things go for the most part. So, all right.
Too quick to go to that. You know what I mean? To go to that physical piece, because I don't know, for whatever reason, it's their mindset. They want to test it out or whatever. But if you fail to hone your communication skills or situational awareness skills, you're just putting yourself in danger.
Well, and after you've been in a fight or 2 or 5, you really quickly realize you don't want to do that anymore. It's not that much fun. It's not cool. It's not Hollywood. And the court process, everything afterwards gets old. So, okay.
Yeah, that's a fact.
All right. Let me jump back into some of Laura's questions here. Experience. Yeah. How has your experience during your career made you this is a big question, made you a better man, a better husband, and a better father?
Geez, Laura.
No.
Making me think about things. All right. So how's my experience in my career made me a better husband, father, right? Family man, basically. That's the question.
Yep.
Well, me and my wife talk about this quite often, especially since I retired. All 3 of my kids are, grown, and hopefully now that they're in the military, like my son, he's not going to be able to come home for his sister's birthday when she comes to visit and things like that. So they're starting to understand, how those careers kind of set you outside of the family circle for a little while in certain circumstances. We talk about it all the time, and I wish things could have been different. I wish I could have been home more. I wish when I was in the prisons, I didn't have to do all that shift work or work doubles, just to make enough money on a paycheck to buy the kids some school clothes, things like that. Yep. You understand. I know you do. And it's, that time away is time that you never get back. I feel like the focus that I was able to gain when I was in the Bureau of Prisons and in the Federal Air Marshal Service kind of helped me to be able to focus more at home on the things that are important. Because when you're doing the job, if you lose sight of the things that are important, which is like your situational awareness, safety, what other people are doing around you, then you're putting yourself in a considerable amount of danger. At home, if I'm not paying attention to what my daughters are doing or what my son's doing or what their grades are looking like and stuff like that, then I'm doing the same thing. So that situational awareness piece isn't just for self-defense. It teaches you to read your, people around you, your family, your children. And when something's off, if you have those communication skills where you can kind of talk things out a little bit. Now, I'll admit that my communication skills now at 53 years old are a whole lot better than they were at 25, when I first started that business. But over time, everything just kind of starts to meld together, and you can use the skill sets that you pick up at work, at home. Unfortunately, there's that trade-off where work has to take you away from home in order for you to pick those skill sets up in the first place.
Well, you touched on an important point. It seems to me like that when I've been around cops or special operations guys or girls types, that because their situational awareness, they've seen so much evil, their situational awareness grows, that they start sensing their partners at home, their husbands, their wives, they sense their kids at home better. They sense their friends better. They pay more attention to the stuff that matters in life. And it seems like oftentimes relationships, if they're paying attention to those things, relationships get better simply because in the defensive world, they practice situational awareness. My hot little wife, right? She's a detective, and I knew her long before she was a cop. And boy, watching her become a cop and then that 1.5 or 2 years of complete change of personality, you know how that goes, right?
Oh, yeah.
The complete change of personality, it changed her as a human. And I mean, she was already fantastic, and it just made her even better by the mere fact that she saw so much evil and her situational awareness grew, that now she became more aware of her interpersonal life too. And I thought that was such an interesting thing to watch happen to somebody else.
Yeah, and I think that's an important balance, because in my experience, the guys who don't take those lessons, because like I said, work is going to pull you away from home when you work in law enforcement, especially as a Federal Air Marshal. I was gone 3-4 nights a week, and I'd be in a different country, 2 of those nights. Mm-hmm. Well, if I came home and I didn't use that awareness to kind of tune myself into my family and forget about work for a little while, I think that's where all the divorce in law enforcement and stuff comes in, is because people don't know how to let the job go and just use those skill sets to kind of dial into what's happening at the house, as opposed to being at home, but letting their mind think about whatever's supposed to be happening at work or what they're missing out on and things like that. And people start feeling left behind. They feel cut out. And when they feel cut out, they retaliate.
Well, and that's where in the law enforcement world, the world you're in, the military world, right, we lose so many marriages because of that. So, yeah. Hey, I want to jump to your books. You've mentioned it. I'm an avid reader, right? I grew up in West Africa. There's not much to do but play soccer, go to school, and read books, right? So I'm an avid reader. I see you have books behind you. You're an author. I think from what I can tell, the stuff you write must be really worth people's time. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So, I had an idea. I'll start from the beginning and kind of tell you how this whole thing came about. But I started off when I was flying as an air marshal. I had a notebook, and I would just keep, because I wasn't one of those guys that kept my headphones on or just tuned out. But I wanted to keep myself alert and aware of what was happening around me without cutting myself off visually or auditorily from my surroundings. So I would sit there and I'd write a lot of stuff on my notebook, and then when I'd get to the hotel room at night, I'd get a little bit of sleep and I'd start typing things up. And eventually, over a period of about a year, I ended up with a 75,000 word manuscript, and I titled it MAP, which was an acronym for Mindset, Awareness, and Preparation. And then it was Navigating the World of Violence, using those 3 things. And I started submitting things out to publishers, and I got several letters back from other ones, and some were nicer than others, but they were all, like, no offense for us kind of thing. And then finally, YMAA Publications, who they focus primarily on self-defense books, and they got a whole line of self-defense books. Anybody out there that's listening, I recommend, giving them a look. But YMAA, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, YMAA Publications. So, some of my favorite books that I had read when I was coming up in the prison system and stuff was written by a guy named Rory Miller. And he wrote a book called Meditations on Violence. Well, he was an old prison hack, and I started reading his stuff, and I thought, well, why not submit this manuscript to YMAA Publications and see what happens? Well, they sent it back, and they actually used the word unfit to publish whenever they sent me the letter back. They said, however, there is a part in this book that we find fascinating that we don't really touch on in our other books, and that's the situational awareness piece that you talk about. So why don't you strip this down to the situational awareness thing, focus on that, and then resubmit? So I did. I took everything I wrote, I stripped it all down, and now I had a goal, right? I just got to focus on the situational awareness piece and see where it takes me. So then I wrote another manuscript, sent it to them, and they picked it up. I started working with a fantastic editor by the name of Doran Hunter, and he helped me get that book polished and everything. YMAA published it. It was called Spotting Danger Before It Spots You.
Yep.
And it ended up being a 4-book series. So the first book, Spotting Danger Before It Spots You, is about situational awareness in general. And it's not written specifically for military or law enforcement types. It's written for moms, dads, people in there that just, kids going off to college that would just
want to really need this. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I put it in plain language. I try not to use too much, the military and law enforcement jargon. And it was an incredibly popular book. So the second book in the series is Spotting Danger Before It Spots Your Kids. And these books are still for adults. And this one's for parents who have children between the ages of 4 and 12 years old. And you're not going to set a 4-year-old down and say, hey, let's talk about situational awareness, right?
No.
You're not even going to set a teenager down and say that, because they're just going to roll their eyes at you like, Dad, you're nuts. But, there are little things you can do with your children to get them detached from their devices and more engaged with their surroundings. And when it comes to younger children, I outline all that stuff in that book.
Okay. Let's stop right there, right? Because I've seen too many horrific things that happen to young kids, right? Yeah. And parents who just didn't know. Without spilling your entire book, because I can tell already, people need to go buy just your first 2 books. You need to go buy them. But can you give us some indicators, right? Because we have no better precious assets than our children. So Can you give us just a few quick synopsis or quick, easy things without delving too far into your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that I used to do with my kids and my wife used to do with our children is to keep them engaged. And I'll tell you why we did this in a little bit, but because, it was a necessity that we teach our children this. And the first thing that we did was try to get them engaged with their environment. So when you're driving down the road, you can play little games with them. I Spy, simple game. Everybody knows how to play it. It gets them looking around. It gets to thinking about what's around them. And then you branch off from that. And we do things like, okay, I'm going to let you tell me how to drive home. So they start memorizing the way home, and they start picking up on different landmarks along the way so they know where they're at. And then, we taught them about communication skills, how, we teach you certain things like, you be polite to people, you don't be rude, you don't fight, you don't spit, you don't kick, all these different things that you got to teach your kids. But in the event that you need to. Right, exactly. In the event that you feel threatened and you think you need help because some adult is, giving you this bad vibe or saying things to you that you don't necessarily like, then all those manners that we taught you, those go out the window. You kick, you fight, you scratch, you do anything you need to do to get away from that person. But, the book is focused primarily on just how to keep kids engaged with their surroundings. And as a parent, what you need to be looking for in your children, to kind of detect some of the things that could be bothering them, and how the two of you can work together to ensure your personal safety and theirs. So I think it came out really well. Unfortunately, the books for the children, and then the third one is for teens, kind of the same concept, but for teenagers, because they pose their own set of problems. And then the fourth book in the series is and it just came out in April, is Spotting Danger for Travelers. And that was kind of my forte, you know, as a Federal Air Marshal, just teaching people how to stay safe when they're out and about, away from their, you know, the familiarity of their own home and in an unfamiliar territory.
All right. Well, I kind of grew up all over the world. I travel a bit. In fact, early this coming morning, I'm going to be catching a red eye to Fort Worth to teach down there.
Oh,
Can you give me some travel tips that others can use?
Well, you know, the one thing that I did in the book is I broke it down into, because it's just like we talked about with self-defense. It's more than about the gun or the black belt or whatever it is you have, right? It's more than that. And when it comes to travel safety, it's also more than just what you do in your hotel room or, you know, how to watch your six whenever you're walking down the street, you know, in an unfamiliar city. So I always tell people, in order for you to be focused on the end destination, you need to make sure that everything at home is squared away first, or else you're going to get to where you're going and your mind's going to be back at the house. So make sure everything's good with the wife, make sure everything's good with the kids. If you're all going on a vacation together, make sure you got a good support system so you know the house is being looked after, the garbage is being taken out, your house isn't being targeted for robbery, things like that. That frees you up so that whenever you get to your destination, you know, you can focus more on the things that are going to keep you safe, like the situational awareness piece. Now, in terms of just, you know, things you can do right off the bat, is a lot of people think that just because they're in a hotel room and they flip that little latch on the door, they're safe. But there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of street scams and stuff like that that go on, not just overseas, but in different cities here in the United States. And that's what that book is about, is how to spot and identify those things. Make yourself comfortable in a place that you're not even familiar with. Set up a base of operations and just have concentric circles of security from your room, which I call your base of operations, out into the places that you're going to be visiting.
So on that book alone, right, it's focused on the traveler, presumably for the civilian. Is this something who maybe they didn't grow up in the law enforcement world, the military world, the world you did, that they can easily take this concepts from your book and just make it easy for them, so it doesn't consume their entire time? They're not paranoid all the time. It's just do these quick, simple steps and then maintain general awareness throughout. Is that kind of what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, I tell people that, you know, to walk around in a state of hypervigilance all the time, thinking that there's
exhausting.
You can't live that way.
No.
You know, and I've seen way too many guys in the beginning of the Federal Air Marshal Service, right after 9/11, you know, getting on planes, and every dude that walked past them was a terrorist in their mind, you know, and that's no way to live. So what you got to do is, and like we talked about, and this is one of the things that I feel like helped me most in Bureau of Prisons, is establishing a baseline of behavior. I need to know what's normal in what situations. So if I go to a beach, I know how people are going to be dressed, how they're going to be acting, you know, what's going to be happening around me when I get there. Same thing if I go to a dinner party at a friend's house. I know how they're going to be acting. I know what's going to be happening. I know how the people in my friends group normally act. And when something falls outside that baseline or rises above it and catches your attention, then that's where the awareness piece comes in. And I'm sure you're familiar with Cooper's colors and the levels of awareness. And we always teach people to be in that condition yellow, which is that relaxed state of awareness. You're not zoned out and completely focused, locked on your cell phone. You still have the wherewithal to know what's going on around you without being hyper vigilant and stressing yourself out.
Interestingly enough, despite her internet issues, right, Laura's also sick. Well, anyway, she called me the other day and was all excited because she saw something. Her awareness is opened up. She saw something that, you know, it just triggered her. She started paying attention, right? It's even in Montana where she's at, it's hot. And some dude was out there in a big hot coat and in front of the bar looking all weird. She's like, her bells went off. And it was just so interesting to hear her story of how over time her awareness has grown. And I think that's the biggest thing you pointed on, is when things in your environment are not normal, that's the things to pay attention to, right? And you should always be looking for your escape route, or where you can go to cover something if something doesn't seem right. If it doesn't seem right, then pay attention to it. But if it's okay, just let it go. Stop living the paranoid lifestyle. But if it doesn't right, now pay attention. And I think you're basically saying the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I've always taught all my students is, there's not a terrorist around every corner.
No.
But, there could be danger in front of you. And if you don't know what you're looking for, then you're going to walk right into it. And your best bet, like Mr. Miyagi said in The Karate Kid, the best way to win a fight, right? No be there. So
I'll be there.
we'll be there. You know?
Best fight you'll ever get into is the one you avoid in the first place.
Nobody there. So if you can spot a dangerous situation from a distance, because when it comes to violence, distance is always your friend,
Yep.
right? If you can see something coming from a mile away and you have a way to get around it, then by all means do that. Don't put yourself in the middle of a sticky situation that you might not be able to get yourself out of. And I tell people that all the time. It's it's okay. It's okay to avoid things if you think you can, especially if you're with your family. I mean, you mentioned earlier whenever you were doing the intro about the iCrime show, and all that is kind of like an America's Funniest Home Videos thing, but for crime. So they catch crime, on CCTV and cell phones or whatever, and then they have us, the various experts on the show. Elizabeth Vargas interviews us and we give our take on the situation, how it could have been avoided, how it could have gone differently, things like that. And, just about every time the situational awareness piece always comes into play. That this person did not have to be in this situation. They could have just gone the other way. And if you if you put yourself in the middle of stuff and you allow it to escalate, you watch some of those videos that they send me, every couple of weeks that I have to comment on. And you're like, how in the hell did this get to this point in the first place? And whenever they ask me, like, what's your first thought on this video? I'm like, I'm thinking this guy's an idiot, because why is he here? Why did he get in this situation in the first place? So, and, in my experience, a big percentage of problems can be avoided if you know what to look for. And, I'm sure you've done this before with your family or whatever, is play those little what if games. What if we're out here in the mall and something happened, and we had to get out of here? Which way would you go? What exit would you use? Why? And get your family and your kids, especially, thinking about that kind of thing, because we always taught people in the Federal Air Marshal Service, your body's not going to go where your mind hasn't been. It's easy for people to stand there and say, I'll be there on game day. Don't you worry about it. No, you won't. You're not going to be there on game day. You're going to shit your pants like everybody else that's never trained. So, you got to train yourself. You got to think about these things. You got to put yourself in those situations that are uncomfortable, because when you see it for real, then you're like, okay, I know what this is. I know how to handle it. And you can get through it a whole lot easier.
So for everybody watching, right, Gary's talking about the if-then drills. If this happens, then I'll do that. Or I like to call them when-then. When this happens, then I'll do that, right? Okay. And I'll tell you, it's mentally exhausting at first. And the more detail you go into it, the better off you are. And the better you're going to react, because as Gary, as you just said, right, where the brain goes, you can actually go too. And I strongly recommend it. But I'll tell you, for me as a cop at first, that was exhausting. But after a while, your brain starts doing it naturally on its own, especially if you do it with your family, right?
Right.
At first, they're like, but after a while, they start seeing the value of it, especially if you have a small incident. And then next thing you know, suddenly they're more involved. And it's a great training tool for people who want to do this. Just if this happens, then I'll do that. Well, why? If this happens, I'll do this. And if it changes, then I'll do that. And man, right. I'm so glad to hear this stuff from you.
Yeah, well, my kids do it now. I mean, even when they were teenagers, we'd be walking through Target or something, and you'd see some kid, on their cell phone getting ready to walk into a pillar or something, or walk into somebody pushing a cart, and my daughter would always be like, "Look at that! Look, they're in condition white, Dad. Can you believe it?" All right. But my kids are that way for a reason, and I talk about it in the book, and I'll tell you the story now if you don't care.
No, please.
I think it's important for people to understand that, there's a reason that we need to teach this to children. And I'm not talking about using fear as a tool to teach your kids. I'm completely opposed to that. But when I first started working as a Federal Air Marshal, we were told that we would be targeted by terrorists. If they found out who we were, that there's the potential for them to target us or our families or whatever. So we had to be really careful, with our personal information, who we let know what. Social media was just becoming a big thing, you know what I mean? And it was it was a whole different world for a lot of people. But my kids, I got 3 kids, right? And at the time I had 2 that were in elementary school. They went to the same elementary school. And my youngest was still at home with my wife. And I was on an overnight. I was working out of the Las Vegas field office, and and we'd already had guys who had suspicious packages mailed to their house, had to call bomb squads, all this different stuff, right? So I'm at the house, I'm on an overnight in Baltimore. It was a domestic overnight. Thank God I wasn't overseas. I'm in Baltimore. My wife's in Las Vegas, and I get a phone call from my wife going, what the hell is going on? I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, the school said that you called and you're taking the kids out of school, and because of your job that you're being transferred, and they're not coming back. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't called the school. I don't even know those people. So anyway, long story short, what had happened was, I had become what I call a 9-to-5er in the Air Marshal Service. When it came time for me to go to work and get on the plane, I'm strapped up. I'd get to the airport and I'm switched on. So I'm situationally aware. I'm looking at what's going on. But then on the flip side of that, when I'm coming home, I'd let my awareness down. I'd relax. Now I'm on the way home. The threat is behind me. It was, I'm an air marshal. It was in the air. Now I'm on the ground. Everything's fine. But that's not how it went. So I guess somebody got enough personal information gathered on me that they knew my kids' names. They knew where they went to school. They knew, they knew way too much about me and my family. A man called the school and said that he was Gary Quesenberry, and because of his job with the government, that he was being transferred and he was going to have to pull the kids out of school. So he said to have their stuff together, and he would be there at 3:00. School let out at 3:30. So he was going to come 30 minutes early and take my kids out of school. Now, my wife used to volunteer at the school because they were so short-staffed, and she'd been out, running some errands with my youngest daughter. They finished up early, and she decided that she would go to the school just to see if the teachers needed any help before the end of the day. And that's when she found out about the phone call and called me. So, one of my old supervisors, he's a former Navy SEAL, just a really high-speed dude, Craig Sawman Sawyer. You probably see him on the internet everywhere. Yep. Well, he was my supervisor. I called him first, and I'm like, hey, Craig, this is what's happening, man, and I don't know what to do. He's like, we're on it. So everybody got together. People were calling my wife saying, look, this is what you need to do. We'll be there in a little bit. The local law enforcement got involved for whatever reason, but this dude that called the school never showed up. So I don't know if it's because he saw that somebody was onto this and the law enforcement presence that was showing up at the school. So he bailed on it, but nothing ever happened after that. The police never found out who it was or why they did it. They were at our house quite a bit asking questions. First questions, obviously, are, is this like a stepchild? No, me and my wife have been together forever. These are our children. There's no other parents involved that would try to take the kids. Second question was, did you piss anybody off when you worked in the prisons? Maybe they want to come after you. I'm like, it's a possibility. I never tried to, but in the course of doing my job, obviously people are going to get upset. So, that incident is what changed the way we live, and me and my family lived our lives. So we felt that it was necessary to take these things that I learned in the prisons and in the Federal Air Marshal Service and apply them to the family setting. And then once I started getting later on in my career and my kids were grown, and I seen how this had affected them and how they paid attention to their surroundings, and how situational awareness just helped them be. I always felt safe turning them loose because I knew they knew what they were doing and why they were doing it. That's the important part, is they have to know why this is important. And my kids had that buy-in from a very early age. So it was easy for us. But that's what eventually led me to write these books in the way that I wrote them, so that I could educate parents, and children alike on some of the dangers without using that fear piece as a tactic, and get this point across so that people can do the things they need to do. Get their face out of their cell phone and pay attention to what's happening, and teach their kids to do the same, because everybody depends on it, the whole family,
So Laura, if you don't mind, maybe typing in the names of his books here in the comments so people can see them. And Gary, where can people go to find your books?
Well, I've got a website.
And are they also, you got a website? Are they also audio at all?
Yes, all of them, but the last one I just submitted because they wanted me to do all the audio files myself, like read the book myself, which I'd rather take an ass beating than do that again. It's a lot of work, but anyway, I've got a website, which is GaryQuessenberry.com. All the books are on there, and there's links to where you can buy them. You can go to YMAA's website and pick them up directly from there. You can find them on Amazon. Anywhere books are sold, you can find these books. Okay. And the audio book. So there's the ebook, there's the print version, and the audio books. Now the first 3 books, all the audio is released. It's just that 4th book that we're working on the audio now.
So a thought here, folks. The ebooks and all that are great. A lot of us do that. But at some point in time, technology can delete those things. So if you ever get the hard copy, I'd tell you that's as good an option as you can get, right? That's preservable in an electronic age. So, all right, I want to try to jump back a little bit to some of Laura's questions here in a minute. But before we do, folks, feel free to post questions here for Gary. Before we do, you said earlier that you're a trainer, but you said earlier, I think we were off air in the green room, that you said that you're kind of having more people come in to teach your place, it seems like. But can you tell us a little bit about the training you do? Because you have a lifetime of experience to put into people. And it's not just the gumshoe stuff that every instructor gets from some other instructor. You're actually coming from a real life experience. Can you kind of tell us about the training you do, and then if they're not coming to you, who do you send people off to?
Okay. So it's you're close on the details on that. So okay. I don't teach here. Okay. I don't have, I have a gun range, but it's my private range that I train on. I keep my skills sharp and stuff. And every now and then, because I'm local and I know people around here, they'll be like, hey, I'd like to learn how to do this or that. And I'll bring people over and teach a few things here and there. But as far as, the major part of my instruction now, I do it like as a guest instructor for other agencies. So if somebody wants me to come out, like Robin Sandoval, you guys have interviewed her before. A girl,
love Robin, incredible lady.
She is so incredible. It's unbelievable. The things that woman is able to manage and juggle in her life is just beyond me. But she had me come out, not this past year, but the year before, to that big event that they have in Colorado every year. And I was a guest instructor out there for the week. And I do things like that. So I do a lot of public speaking now on situational awareness and family safety and stuff like that. The stuff that I cover in my books, basically, I kind of take that on the road for people that request it. And then, if there's, somebody that's looking for a guest instructor to kind of put a new spin on some things for them, or, kind of, I don't know, like inject something new to their, to their clientele, then I come out and do stuff like that. So that's kind of what I do now. Just now that I'm in retirement, I try not to stay too regimented. I like to be a little bit more flexible, but I like to still keep those instructional skills sharp.
So for instructional stuff, if people want to come out, right? Because in person is always better, right? Sure. If people want to come learn from you in person, whether it's the gun stuff or situational awareness, the speeches you do, can they just contact you through your website?
You can contact me through my website, or, and that goes right to my email address. And my email address is just info@GaryQuessenberry.com. Okay. So, and I know that last name's not really easy to spell, but you can Google it, it'll pop up.
I looked it up. It's there. So, all right. So when you go talk someplace, do you just do like hour segments, 2 hours? Are they full day sessions? How do you do that?
I build it to whatever people want. So, if you want to do a half a day training course on situational awareness with a practical exercise thrown in there, I can do it. If you just got an hour you need to fill at some sort of a corporate event or something, and you need somebody to fill that time with a little bit of a talk on, situational awareness, because it applies to the workplace just as well as it does anywhere else, then I'll do that. So, I encourage people that if it's something that they're interested in, to reach out to me, and we'll talk out the details of what you need and, how you want me to build it. And, I customize everything for the end user, because at the end of the day, they have to want the information that they're getting. I'm not going to force anything on anybody. So you tell me what you need, I'll build you the course, and we'll come out and we'll have a good time. That's
the best way. That's what I have to do a lot, and it's the best way to do it. I'm going to throw another Laura question at you, because I think it's a really good, deep one. Okay. Stand by here. Was there ever a mistake that you have made that you learned the most from, and how did you use it to better yourself?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But I know the answer. I mean, I know it right off the top of my head.
Are you willing to share?
Yeah, I'll share it. I'll share it because it's hard for me to talk about, but I think it's important. So, I worked in the prison for a long time. I started when I was 25 years old. You're naive at 25 years old. Yep. By the time I started with the Air Marshal Service, I was 30, and still not exactly as tuned into things as I feel like I should have been. Later on in the Federal Air Marshal Service, we started learning about things that happen within the aviation domain other than terrorism, right? Because whenever we first started, we felt like, I did at least, I don't want to speak for the Air Marshal Service in general, But I felt like my job was to stop acts of terrorism in the aviation domain. That's my, that was my job. That's what I was focused on. So one day I'm on a flight from Las Vegas, and I forget the destination. It was somewhere on the East Coast. And there was a lady that came on the plane and sat in front of me, and she had a younger girl with her. She probably looked like she was 13, 14 years old. And the girl was obviously intoxicated, the younger girl.
Ooh.
And and it was shocking to me to see that. And the girl and the woman looked similar enough that I assumed incorrectly that, they were a family. And then I started overhearing some of the things that she was saying, because the girl kept being defiant. She kept trying to get out of her seat. She kept trying to get her bag. She kept trying to leave the plane before it was finished boarding. And that woman kept setting her back down in her seat, fastening her seatbelt for her, and, saying something to her in Spanish I didn't understand, but you could tell that it was threatening. You know what I mean? So I didn't know what that was. I figured it was a family issue, and I didn't have any business getting involved in it. It wasn't until years later, when we started receiving the human trafficking training and stuff like that, and we started looking for those type things, that I realized what I'd seen 5 years ago. I saw this girl being trafficked, and I know that's what it was now in hindsight.
But you can't know what you don't know.
I know, and that's the thing. But that's still, once you do know it, you can't unknow it, and that haunts me to this day. That happened right in front of me, and I feel horrible about it. I feel horrible, but, later on down the road, we did break that kind of thing up on several occasions, flying to places like Amsterdam and stuff like that. So we knew what to look for. And I always took it incredibly personal when I'd see something like that and we would get involved. I'm 100% in. We're going to fucking stop this right now, kind of thing, because I knew what had happened. I knew what I had let slip past me because I was just uneducated on it. And I vowed I would never let that happen again in front of me. So it was a hard lesson to learn. It's hard to talk about, but I think it's important. So that's it.
It's a hard thing to see. I've seen
Absolutely.
It, and it's sickening. And I know
I think about that girl all the time.
Yeah, there's a big movie out now. I have not seen it yet, but I know that there's going to be a hardness to go see that. I'm gonna, but just simply because of things I've seen too, and like you, I just didn't know.
I'll tell you what, man, I wouldn't seen that movie, and I left there in tears. And I told my wife, I'm like, I can't get this out of my head. Like this little girl, I can still see her face to this day. And that happened, right, it was probably 2002 when that happened. So, it's been a long time. It's been over 20 years, and I still see that little girl's face.
Let me jump back to some of Laura's questions, because she's got some good ones here.
No deeper than that one, though, please.
Believe me. All right. Okay, so tell us about Top Shot. You're on 2 different seasons, or no, you were on one season and then a All-Stars. How did that happen? And tell us about that, because I want to go see it. I tried to follow it all, but I haven't seen them all, and I must have missed this. Okay,
so Top Shot came out, and the first season, they didn't really advertise the fact that they were looking for competitive shooters or people in the firearms industry or whatever, military snipers, anybody that had primitive weapons experience, anything that dealt with marksmanship. The premise was they're going to put these people in a house together like a reality show.
Yeah.
Split them up into 2 teams. They're going to compete. Somebody goes home every episode until it's down to the final 2, and then they compete for the title of Top Shot and $100,000, right? So the first season, they recruited. They specifically pinpointed people and recruited. And one of my good friends, who at the time was also a Federal Air Marshal, his name's JJ Rakaza.
I watched the whole season. Yes, he's great.
Yeah, JJ is a phenomenal shooter. He holds a couple of world records, I think. And me and JJ were buddies. So about the time the second season rolled around, JJ started reaching out to me and a couple other people that he knew that he thought had the personality and the skill sets to work out on this show. And he was like, "Hey man, you really ought to do this." And I was like, "Nah, I'm not." At the time I'm working in Atlantic City, which is where the Federal Air Marshal Service Training Center is. And I was a firearms instructor there for 3 years. So I'd had the opportunity to shoot every day at one of the most premier facilities in the country. And I was on top of my game, but I was focused on the job as opposed to, doing some TV stuff. Well, second season came and went. Third season rolled around again. People were like, "Hey dude, you should really put in for this. Like, I think you'd be good at it." So third season, by that time I had left Atlantic City. I was working as a supervisor in Cleveland, a job that I absolutely hated because I was behind a desk, and I wasn't suited for that. But anyway, I got word that third season was coming out. I should put my application in. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I got enough leave saved up. I'll put in for it. They narrowed, I forget how many contestants they said put in for, like 27,000 people or something. But they ended up narrowing it down to 100 people. They took that 100 people out to LA and they did interviews and psychological exams, drug tests. They took you out to a range to actually make sure you could shoot. And then the one thing they did that I thought was interesting was they screwed the guns up. Like they'd knock the sights off and stuff on purpose just to see how you would react to that. If you would get mad, you would adjust on the fly.
That's brilliant.
So, yeah. So, the people that could adjust and adapt and stuff like that, I think were the people that they were looking for. And me and one of my best friends in the world, a guy named Jarrett Grimes, they picked us both up and we were there together during that third season of Top Shot. And it was a really good experience. They put us on opposite teams, of course, so they could pit us against each other. But I ended up finishing third. So I made it all the way to the final episode and made a lot of really good friends along the way. It was a lot of fun. But I'll tell you this, it wasn't as fun as it looks on TV because of the editing. Like that one episode took 2 days and there's so much downtime and you would just, you know how it is.
Yeah.
You're getting yourself in this mental state. You're getting ready to compete and you're zoned in and you've got yourself all hyped up. And then right when you're getting ready to hear the buzzer and you're about to start shooting, they'd be like, hold for sound. We got an airplane coming over, and we'd have to stop. And then all that adrenaline just dumps out of you and you're like, oh my God. And then you got to ramp up again, and then there would be something else, it was frustrating, but it was a whole lot of fun.
Just because we're ending on time here, I want to jump away because Laura's got a really good question here.
Okay.
I think I know the answer for me, but I'm very curious of yours. And I think the audience is going to be interested. Here's her question. Many of us have the same values you do and are very proud to live in this country. But as we know, not everybody feels the same way. Given what's happened over the last few years, what is your biggest hope and what is your biggest concern for the future of this country?
Well, my biggest concern is just the level of corruption and stuff that you see in politics. And I don't care what side of the fence you're on when it comes to politics. They're all crooked, in my opinion, and I feel like government just needs to be smaller and I feel like that's our biggest hurdle to a successful future.
And this is coming from a Fed.
Yeah, exactly. So you get close enough to the government and you work for them for about 25 years and you see the ugly underbelly, and you see the corruption and stuff in your own agencies. And just imagine exponentially how that increases, as you go higher up the chain. And that concerns me. And, I don't care who's sitting in the big seat. I don't care who it is. As long as they have the American people's best interest at heart, then that's the person that I'm looking for to lead this country. But, I'm a vet, I served and I worked for the government for, almost 30 years total. And it's just, it's very eye-opening, and I hope that there's some change on the horizon. Now, the one thing that I hold hope in is, it's very easy for us to get discouraged with future generations. Every generation has done it all the way back to Plato. He wrote about how, the generation under him, like these people, they don't even get it. They're going to ruin everything, right? This is Plato. So, and every generation does that to the generation that comes behind them. They're like, oh my God, they're going to screw this up. But, I've got my nephews and stuff that live across the street. And, the one thing that I've noticed that gives me hope in the future is the fact that a lot of kids, like in the 8 to 9, 10-year-old range, I'm seeing them outside, like doing things I used to do as a kid before cell phones and all that stuff, all those distractions and all the likes on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok or whatever, before all that, we were outside building forts in the woods or building some kind of rickety ramp. And we were pushing ourselves and we were pushing our limits and we were finding out what we were made of, out in nature. And I'm starting to see that roll back around. I don't know why. I think maybe a lot of kids see their parents, on social media and stuff too much. And You know how kids are. They're defiant. Whatever the parents are doing, they want to do the opposite thing. So that's kind of driving them back out into nature, I think. And I'm starting to see that a little bit more. And I hold hope that that continues. And eventually kids will realize that, you know, their life isn't on, you know, it's not on a device. It's out there in the world. So get out there and enjoy it, you know.
Brother, I got to tell you, I feel like we're kindred souls in a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
So it's 7 o'clock, right? We're already a minute past here. So Gary, if you don't mind, I'm going to cut you off here. Please don't go away. Stay in the virtual green room. We want to talk to you afterwards. But for everybody else watching, I'm sorry for going over a little bit. I know we didn't get to our win of the weeks. We'll do that next week. Hold on to them or come up with even better ones for next week. But I was very curious, and I'm brand new to this. So I was curious what Gary had to say. Anyways, before we get out of here, let me give you the last little bits here. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe and all that other stuff. If you haven't already, join our Defenders Live Facebook group and subscribe to us, please, on YouTube if you've not done that or you're seeing it on another platform. We also have a Defenders Live Rumble channel, so please go see that. And in the meantime, if you're willing, please share this stuff to other people. I think there's a lot of really good information that Gary gives and all the great guests that Laura and everybody else she has previously. Share this stuff. Some of the stuff I think is not only life-saving, but it's also life-improving. So please share this stuff with them. In the meantime, I think next weekend we got Riley Bowman coming up. Laura just happened to take a class from him up in Montana just this last weekend. So I'm really looking forward to it. She finally got to spend time with a great shooter like that. So she's going to have Riley Bowman back on for a second time. So we'd love to see you back here next week, spending time with her and Riley Bowman and learning from really his high expertise in the gun world and the things Laura learned just spending time with him. So thank you for watching. Gary, thanks so much. And my best to you guys all. Take care.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate it.
All right.